This past year has been quite the roller coaster ride. Well, not just this last year. I'm not going to go into a deep political and moral discussion here, just gonna say it's been a tough struggle for many people, and it got us thinking over here at Fat Ninja Studios. Films often have the ability to send powerful messages and bring light to situations often glossed over by news media and day-to-day life. Many of us live in our own boxes, dealing with our own problems, without realizing that everything we do affects everyone else around us. A lot of people have a hard time seeing someone who comes from a different background than ourselves and their struggles, as we spend more time thinking about our problems are worse than theirs. So, we put together a list of films that talk about these other issues, about folks from varying different lifestyles and backgrounds, many based on real events. I'm your host, the sentimental activist Jackie K, and this is 12 films with relevant social commentary. Let's begin. Number 1, The Trial of the Chicago 7. Following the lives of 8 men accused of starting the riot outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968, the film primarily focuses on the trial rather than the actual riots. The 8 men in the film, Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, Tom Hayden, Rennie Davis, David Dellinger, Lee Weiner, John Freund, and Bobby Seale, reportedly attacked the police in order to shut down the justice system. Bobby Seale, spokesman for the Black Panther Party, was only in Chicago for a few hours and had never met the other 7. Over the course of the film, each person's part in the protests is explored, as well as their agendas and the political motivations behind the trial itself being fueled by then Attorney General John Mitchell. The previous AG, Ramsey Clark, even takes a stand to say the police incited the riot, and his testimony is stricken from the record. Taken from the actual court transcripts, this is one of the most accurate depictions of the infamous event in history.
If we're guilty, why not give us a trial? I mean, I have sat here for 6 months and watched you. You don't need to grab my arm. I have watched you. I've watched you.
Number 2, Fruitvale Station. The murder of a black man while in police custody is the all-too-real premise behind this film. Based on true events, we follow Oscar Grant, a 22-year-old from Hayward, California, on his last day on New Year's Eve 2009. Throughout the film, we witness his day-to-day, a fight with his girlfriend about his infidelity, an unsuccessful attempt to get his job back at a local grocery store, and an attempt to sell marijuana even though he decides against it and dumps the stash. He also has a young daughter, Tatiana. Later on in the day, he attends a birthday party for his mother before hopping onto the BART to catch the fireworks downtown with his friends. When he is ready to head back home, again taking the train, he is spotted by a customer who used to frequent the grocery store where Grant used to work, and a fight breaks out between them. The police respond to the scene, and after subduing them, while in handcuffs on the ground, one of the officers fires his gun and fatally wounds Grant. Grant is rushed to the hospital, where he succumbs to his wounds and dies. The film transitions to title cards detailing the aftermath, the protests, and the subsequent trial where the officers were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 11 months. The main defense was that the officer who fired the fatal shot believed his weapon was a taser, not a gun. It is a gut-wrenching film to watch, and the ending leaves you feeling a bit angry that justice wasn't quite served. With the many protests of police shootings in the recent years, this one is sure to hit home with many viewers. Number 3, John Q. What would you do if your child or a loved one were sick and in need of medical care, and suddenly, because of the decision of the government or your workplace, they decided you didn't need medical coverage to an extent and changed your plan without notifying you? How many people today suffer from inability to receive adequate care based on insurance premiums because of greedy corporations and the government's unwillingness to create a universal standardized healthcare system? John Q follows Denzel Washington as the titular character trying to get a new heart transplant for his son when he discovers that his insurance won't cover it. Desperately, John and his wife try to raise as much money as they can, pleading with the doctors to save their son, until ultimately when they are ready to send him home, John decides to lock down the hospital and take a few hostages. One of these hostages is the heart surgeon, as well as a few emergency room patients, a nurse, and a paramedic. The film is tense, filled with heavy emotional moments and multiple viewpoints from the various characters. A great commentary on why we need a better solution to the current healthcare crisis and why these insurance companies are allowed to run rampant on many a person's bank accounts. Number 4, Trumbo. Dalton Trumbo was a screenwriter behind many great films, including Roman Holiday, The Brave One, Exodus, and Spartacus. As the Red Menace began to strike fear into the American populace during the height of the Cold War, Trumbo was a majorly outspoken activist against the government's crackdown on free speech and censorship, and thus was blacklisted in Hollywood and thrown in jail for being a communist conspiracist, along with multiple other writers, actors, and directors. However, this did not stop Trumbo from undermining the system, writing under aliases, and using the help of other out-of-work screenwriters to continue getting work. He eventually met Frank King, who owned and operated King's Brothers Productions, with his brother Maurice, and produced mostly B-rated horror flicks. Under their studio, Trumbo wrote at least 30 films, one of which was The Brave One, which won an Oscar that he was unable to collect. Eventually, as the Red Scare died down, Trumbo decided to come forward with the help of Kirk Douglas and Otto Preminger, and his name was restored to the credits of both Spartacus and Exodus. While today we have social media to voice our opinions, the media often censors the truth at the behest of politically motivated companies who own the news. Censorship is a real issue going forward in a world where the government promises transparency. Definitely worth checking the film out. It boasts a well-acted cast featuring the likes of Bryan Cranston, Helen Mirren, John Goodman, Alan Tudyk, and Diane Lane. Number 5, The Florida Project. Following a single mother living in a hotel room just outside of Disney World who sells sex to feed her children and drug habits, the film is a unique look at the struggles of what it means to be young, beautiful, and lost. Mooney, her 6-year-old daughter, is often hanging out unsupervised with Scooty, the son of one of her mother's friends. Bobby, the hotel manager, often looks after the kids, even if they annoy him at every turn, and is pretty lenient with their respective parents. The mother, Haley, loses her job as an exotic dancer and soon has to turn to other methods to make money, including selling perfume to tourists and babysitting Scooty for a free meal. At one point, a pedophile skulks around the premises, whom Bobby quickly ejects. Things get even worse when the children burn down a mostly abandoned old condominium, to which Scooty's mom cuts off her friendship with Haley. With no free meals and even less income, Haley turns to prostitution, hiding Mooney in the bathroom with loud music while she has clients over. After Bobby confronts her about the prostitution, she again tries to talk to Scooty's mom and ask her for money, but when she refuses, the two fight in the parking lot. DCF begins to investigate and decide to place the child in foster care, to which Mooney decides to run away. The film is bittersweet and all too real in times of economic decline. So many single parents struggle these days to keep a roof over their heads, and with benefits drying up and jobs harder to come by, as well as ensuing daycare costs and so forth, it's quite the uphill struggle for the most part. A beautifully shot film, well acted, almost too realistic at times. It's worth a watch and maybe some deep thought for those of you who haven't had it as tough and are looking to help someone in need. Number 6, A Requiem for a Dream. If you haven't had a friend or loved one die to an overdose, count yourself lucky. More and more, drugs have become an increasingly problematic disease in our society, mostly affecting young adults. Directed by Darren Aronofsky, the film beautifully portrays the horrific decline into drug addiction and, in some cases, death. All the thieving, lying, emotional turmoil, it's on full display, played to an evocative soundtrack and with haunting character acting by the likes of Jared Leto, Marlon Wayans, and Jennifer Connelly. I highly warn you that the film does not shy away from much of its surrealism, and so go into the film with the knowledge that you may or may not be triggered by some of its scenes. And please, if you're an addict, seek help. Getting high is not worth losing your life over. Number 7, American History X. It is a sad fact that racism still exists in 2021. Regardless of your political affiliations or so, it is inexcusable to still hate someone and treat them inhumanely just because they have different religious beliefs, sexuality, or even just the color of their skin. American History X is a film that tackles both sides, what it is to be the one spewing hatred, and what it's like to be on the receiving end. Edward Norton plays Derek Vineyard, along with Edward Furlong as his brother Danny. Derek is a neo-Nazi white supremacist, covered in tattoos of symbols of hatred, and viciously attacks a young man in his neighborhood, murdering him and going to prison for 3 years. His brother Danny, growing up in his shadow, antagonizes his Jewish history teacher by writing an essay on Mein Kampf, the notorious book written by Adolf Hitler, and gets in fights with other minority groups in his school. When Derek is released from prison, he has turned his life around, talking openly about his experience as a neo-Nazi and attempting to reach out to other youth groups in swaying them from gangs. Danny joined a neo-Nazi group, DOC, and Derek tries to get him to leave. After a confrontation at a rally, Danny really begins to listen to Derek, but it's too late, as the next day in school, he is shot by an African-American student, and Derek is left cradling his body. The film takes no notion to hide the ugliness of racism, and the two brothers really have a tragic arc, with a big neon message that hate gets you nowhere. Number 8, Leave No Trace. Off the grid, a phrase more commonly associated with spy films or international crime thrillers. Yet lately, more and more people have been trying to get away from the systemic nature of society and choosing to live off the grid, far away from the watchful eyes of Big Brother and the dependence on Big G's good nature. From doomsday cults to preppers and people who just want to return to a simpler way of life, the film narrows its focus on a single father and his teen daughter. Living in the woods of Portland, Oregon, the father, Will, suffers from PTSD from his time in the Iraq War. His daughter, Tom, is above normal intelligence, receiving an unusually in-depth education from her father. Together, they forage for food and trap animals, make trades with small communities also living outside of society, until one fateful day, they are spotted and caught. The park rangers and police and other organizations try to reintegrate them into society, putting them up in a nice house, getting Will a job packaging trees on a farm. Eventually it becomes too much for him to deal with, and he once more decides to head into the forest, but this time Tom isn't so willing. After Will is injured, she brings him to a small trailer community, nursing him back to life. Will, unable to stay put, heads back into the woods. After a teary goodbye, Tom stays in the trailer community. The film is shot gorgeously, and the long silences will bring you in to study the characters' every facial tic and deep breath. Heart-wrenching at times, it delves deep into the psyche of a person who can't go back to normal after having their world torn asunder, whether that be through war or other traumatic experience, and that sometimes the best option is to let them go.
Same thing that's wrong with you isn't wrong with me.
Number 9, Spotlight. Following multiple accusations of priests in a Catholic church molesting young boys, the Boston Globe Spotlight team publishes several articles in 2001 naming Cardinal Bernard Law behind the cover-up of a sexual abuse case in 1976, where John Gagin was accused of molesting a child. However, through their investigation, they uncovered several other priests being moved around from different churches in order to hide and quell any accusations. The film features some real-life abuse victims sharing their stories, and often ventures into uncomfortable detail, so viewer be warned. Led by a stellar cast including Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, and Rachel McAdams, it's definitely relevant to current ongoings with child sex trafficking involving high-ranking officials and even some church members. Number 10, Wag the Dog. The 2020 election has, at the very least, been an interesting piece of entertainment. With mudslinging, fake outrage over supposed voter fraud, and Supreme Court tampering, it brings to mind the Gore-Bush recount incident in 2000. Wag the Dog sees a spin doctor, Conrad Bryan, played by Robert De Niro, and a Hollywood producer, Stanley Motz, played by Dustin Hoffman, construct a fictional war with Albania to distract the American people from a presidential sex scandal. Getting wind of this fakery, the CIA tries to shut it down by announcing the war has ended. But Motz invents a hero who was left behind enemy lines. Multiple lies pile on one another until eventually the fake hero is killed and has a massive military funeral. After the president is reelected and credits his own campaign rather than thanking Motz for his help, he decides to try and go public with the true story, in which Bryan has him executed and they release a fake news story about Motz having a heart attack. While we aren't trying to feed any conspiracy theories here at Fat Ninja Studios, there's some uncanny resemblance to how today's media likes to spin their stories, or to use certain events to try and distract citizens from other ongoing topics. Just remember, be careful what you read, and be even more careful about what you believe. Always check your sources. Number 11. Network. Fake news. The most coined term of 2020 when it comes to journalism and television entertainment. Networks control what is and isn't allowed to be shown to the public, feeding their own narratives instead of reporting real-world events in an unbiased fashion. It's even bled into entertainment, often creating narratives that influence one side or another of the political spectrum. This isn't anything new, as the film Network shows. Once TV was created, it changed everything, from marketing to political campaigns. And what's the driving force behind the content given to us? Ratings. Network follows UBS after firing one of its nightly news anchors for declining ratings, and he threatens to commit suicide on live television. This gets Beale into the entertainment division, even leading into his own show, The Howard Beale Show. Beale becomes a ratings magnet, even developing a catchphrase: "We're mad as hell and we're not going to take this anymore." As time goes by, he discovers that UBS is being bought out by a Saudi Arabian conglomerate and decides to go on a tirade on his station. Assassination plots ensue, and the film slides into a strange commercialization of all the events. The entertaining death of a celebrity, a commentary on how little our lives matter in the spotlight beyond ratings and marketing. Number 12. Taxi Driver. Vigilantism is usually explored more in comic books than any other media. In a graphic novel, it's easy to see Batman thrashing a criminal and leaving him a beat-up mess for the cops to lock up as a hero worth cheering on. It's another in reality where we learn about consequence. Criminals often have mothers, fathers, wives, husbands, children, and more. They aren't just as simple as labeling them a villain, much more complex as most humans actually are. Taxi Driver is a great character study, following Travis Bickle, a 26-year-old honorably discharged Marine and Vietnam War veteran. He takes a job as, you guessed it, a taxi driver in New York City. He frequents porn theaters and keeps a diary, mostly filling it with aphorisms like, "You're only as healthy as you feel." Disgusted by the sleaze, prostitution, and dysfunction of the city, especially after encountering child prostitute Iris, he begins to fantasize of saving them all. This all leads to a confrontation with a pimp named Sport, who he shoots along with a few others. Eventually, Iris is killed during the events. Travis slumps to the floor beside her body, attempting to kill himself, but his gun is empty. And as the police arrive, Travis has lost all sensibility and imitates blowing his brains out. With attacks at churches and the Kenosha shooter in recent memory, some people who see themselves as heroes and saviors are dangerous when deciding to take the law into their own hands. Please, if you are ever involved in an event where there's an active shooter, stay safe and wait for the police. So, what did you think of our list? Any films you think should be on the list? Feel free to post a comment down below. Just remember, keep it civil. Everyone deserves to be heard. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to flick that bell icon to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're feeling generous, please check out our Patreon, linked below. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us keep bringing you lists such as these. You can also follow us on Twitter, @StudiosFat, or chat to us on Discord, also linked below in the description. We also want to take a moment here to ask you all to do some research into the multitude of organizations out there who help various people, whether that be for the homeless, or medical care, or even cleaning up the lakes and oceans. Many of them only require a small donation and will go a long way to securing a better future for the next generation, as well as helping a struggling family in need today. All it takes is a few minutes of your day to Google a cause you're particularly interested in, so why not give it a try? And if you don't want to donate, there's always a local shelter or the VA that can use a volunteer, especially around the winter months. Either way, thank you for your time. This has been Jackie K for the Fat Ninja Studios, signing off, and just remember, it's okay to take care of yourself too. It's also okay to ask for help. That's the great thing about society. We're all in this together. Take care.